Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you're joining us. So today, our mission is to explore a really compelling stack of research and programming guides that are totally focused on fitness optimization.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating batch of sources.
It really is. Specifically, we are going to be looking at the mechanics of structuring your sets, your reps, and the surprisingly crucial and frankly, heavily misunderstood role of rest.
Heavily misunderstood is the perfect way to phrase it.
Right. The goal here is simple. We want to synthesize these programming principles to give you a framework for smarter, far more effective workouts. We are going to get bogged down in unnecessary jargon, but we are going to treat the science with the respect it deserves.
Exactly.
Whether you are someone who trains strictly for longevity and health or mental clarity, or, maybe you're just eyeing an upcoming vacation where you want to look and feel a certain way, understanding the architecture of a good routine fundamentally changes how you approach your training.
It does. And the overarching theme we are going to uncover today requires a bit of a paradigm shift for a lot of people. Most of us are conditioned to focus entirely on the active physical work we're doing in a session.
The metabolic stress, the sweating.
The heavy lifting, exactly. We treat the gym like the destination. But the physiological reality is that the real magic, the actual hypertrophy and strengthening of the muscle tissue, happens exclusively during the recovery phase.
Which is such a wild concept when you first hear it.
It really is. It fundamentally flips how you should value the time you spend outside the gym.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the foundational concept of how we actually structure the work, specifically looking at bodyweight resistance training. We are talking about the staples here: push-ups, squats, pull-ups, ab wheel rollouts.
The classics.
Right. And the research we are looking at emphasizes that before you even begin to design a routine, you have to establish a baseline through a trial run.
You have to know where you're starting.
You do. You need to test yourself to failure to see how many reps of an exercise you can realistically execute with perfect form in one go. Because obviously, someone whose central nervous system taps out at 5 push-ups requires a totally different progression model than someone who can effortlessly execute 50.
That trial run is vital because it establishes your current point of failure. But what is really revealing is how the data compares the traditional old-school method of endurance training against a structured volume approach.
Yeah, the old school method is rough.
It is. Let's say your trial run reveals that your absolute maximum number of push-ups, the point where your arms just completely give out, is 20.
Okay.
The old school brute force method would be to just drop down and do a single max effort set of 20 push-ups every single day. You hit that wall at 20, then eventually, maybe weeks later, you grind out 21.
And then maybe 22.
Right. You are just doing one single exhausting set to failure.
And this perfectly illustrates the principle of progressive overload through volume. Instead of redlining your central nervous system with one max set of 20, the programming dictates breaking that workload down into submaximal sets.
Exactly.
So instead of that one set to failure, you do 3 sets of 10. By stepping back from the absolute limit, you instantly go from doing 20 push-ups a day to 30 total push-ups.
It's a huge jump.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Or, depending on your recovery capacity, you might be able to do 3 sets of 15. Suddenly, you're hitting 45 total push-ups in a single session.
You're accumulating significantly more total mechanical tension across the session without completely frying your nervous system.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is the physiological response to that structural change. By breaking the exercise down into manageable sets, you avoid immediate biomechanical failure and allow the muscle to perform significantly more total work.
More work equals more progress.
Precisely. That yields a much greater overall volume. And in the realm of fitness programming, strategically increasing your total volume over time is the most reliable driver of muscle adaptation. You're giving the tissue more total stimulus to adapt to, rather than just testing its absolute limits once and calling it a day.
It is a highly sustainable progression path, and the programming framework lays out exactly how to keep that volume moving upward.
It maps it out perfectly.
It really does.
Yeah.
After a couple of weeks of adapting to your 3 sets of 10 or 15, you force further adaptation. You progress to 3 sets of 20, eventually 3 sets of 25. You can push the volume even further by doing 4 sets of 20 or 3 sets of 30.
And once you've conquered that volume at that specific intensity, you don't just keep adding endless reps.
Right, you switch to a more biomechanically demanding variation of the exercise,
Yeah.
like a decline push-up or a weighted squat, just to introduce a novel stimulus.
And there is a highly recommended psychological component built into this progression timeline as well from the sources.
Oh, I love this part.
It's great. Every couple of weeks, the programming suggests running another trial, run a max rep test. You just drop down and see how many total push-ups you can do in one single all-out set.
Just to see where you're at.
Exactly. It serves two distinct purposes. Analytically, it helps you accurately chart your progress to see how far your baseline has shifted. But psychologically, it provides a very necessary ego boost.
We all need that ego boost.
We do. It is tangible proof that accumulating volume submaximally translates to absolute strength and endurance gains.
You really need that hard data to prove your consistency is actually paying dividends. Now that covers dynamic, concentric, and eccentric movements. But let's shift gears to isometric exercises, or static holds.
Ones that sneak up on you.
Oh, they burn. These are the movements where the muscle length doesn't actually change. You aren't doing reps, you're just holding a position against gravity. Think of the plank, the wall sit, or the Superman pose.
The framework applies a very similar volume accumulation system here, but we are trading reps for time under tension.
Right. Time under tension. Let's use the plank as the example, because everyone knows the plank.
The classic core killer.
Exactly. You hold the position with perfect form as long as physically possible for one single attempt. Let's say your absolute maximum before your core collapses is a 60-second hold.
Okay, so that's the baseline.
Yes. And just like with the push-ups, you have a choice. You could do one agonizing 60-second hold per day, giving you exactly 60 seconds of time under tension.
Which is the old school way.
Right. But applying that same volume strategy, you break it into 3 sets, where each hold is stopped at 30 seconds. By doing that, boom, you just bypassed early core failure and effortlessly increased your total time under tension to 90 seconds.
And that increased exposure to tension forces a more robust adaptation in the core musculature.
Just smart math.
It really is. The progression timeline for this isometric work is clearly mapped out in the text too. Once your body adapts to those 3 sets of 30 seconds, you turn the dial up, you progress to 3 sets of 45-second holds, then on to 3 sets of 60 seconds. Then you increase the total sets, moving to 5 sets of 60 seconds, and eventually working your way up to elite territory like 5 sets of 120 seconds.
Which naturally leads to the question of what happens when you actually hit that massive milestone of 5 sets of 2 minutes.
You don't just keep adding minutes.
Right. The framework is definitive on this. It's time to upgrade the intensity. You have to move on to a more difficult stabilization challenge, like a one-leg plank or a weighted plank.
You cannot just infinitely increase the time. You have to increase the resistance.
Exactly. But before anyone gets to that elite 2-minute level, we have to talk about the dreaded shaking phenomenon.
Oh, yes, the earthquake zone.
You know exactly what I mean. When you hit that zone in the last 15 seconds of a plank, and your entire body starts violently vibrating.
It is an incredibly common physiological response to central nervous system fatigue and muscle fiber exhaustion.
It feels like you're falling apart.
It does, but the literature offers a vital rule of thumb for handling it. It draws a sharp distinction between localized muscle fatigue and biomechanical failure. If you are shaking, even shaking significantly, but your core is still braced and you are maintaining a perfectly straight line from your shoulders to your ankles, you should absolutely hold the position.
So shaking's okay.
Shaking is perfectly fine. That shaking is just your motor units struggling to recruit fresh muscle fibers. It's a necessary part of pushing your threshold. However, if that fatigue causes you to break form, the set is immediately over.
The visual examples of this failure are really clear. If you are doing push-ups or a plank and your body compensates by sticking your butt up in the air, or you find your hips sagging dangerously toward the floor, you are done.
The structural integrity is compromised.
The rule is absolute. Exercising with bad form strictly hinders your progress and invites injury. Quality of the movement always supersedes the quantity of the time or the reps.
It is far better to stop the set than to push through with compromised posture just to hit a number on a stopwatch.
Recite.
Once the target muscle fails and surrounding structures have to compensate, you are no longer training the intended system, you are just surviving the movement.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've talked so much about the work itself. The volume, the time under tension, the mechanical stress. But the programming we are looking at dedicates a massive amount of attention to the precise pauses between the work. Let's dive into micro-rest.
The actual rest periods between your sets?
Exactly.
Micro rest is absolutely critical, and it is often entirely ignored by casual gym goers. People just look at their phone and guess when to start again.
Guilty as charged.
We all do it. But the duration of your rest periods dictates which energy systems your body uses and how effectively you can perform the subsequent set. The research provides a very solid baseline golden rule for hypertrophy and endurance work.
And what is that rule?
Rest for exactly half the duration of the work interval.
So to put a tangible metric to that, let's say you're doing those 3 sets of 20 push-ups. If you time yourself and it takes your body exactly 30 seconds to execute one set of 20 push-ups, your rest interval should be tightly capped at 15 seconds.
It creates a very specific metabolic rhythm.
Work for 30 seconds, rest for 15 seconds to let the ATP replenish just enough, work for another 30 seconds, rest for 15, and then hit your final set.
It's a highly efficient ratio designed to keep the muscle metabolically stressed while allowing just enough cellular recovery to actually complete the next set without the form breaking down.
But there are exceptions, right?
Yes, the text outlines some important metabolic exceptions to this rule. This 2-to-1 work-to-rest ratio isn't a universal law for all training modalities.
Because heavy lifting changes the math.
Exactly. If you are working with significantly heavier loads, say a heavy barbell squat where you are recruiting massive amounts of muscle tissue and heavily taxing the central nervous system, you might actually need a rest interval that is double the work interval.
Or even longer.
Right, just to fully clear the metabolic waste and recover. Alternatively, for efficiency, the programming suggests supersetting 2 antagonistic exercises.
You do a set of push-ups.
And while the chest and triceps are resting, you immediately do a set of pull-ups for the back and biceps. You maximize your metabolic output while the local muscle groups get their required micro-rest.
That superset strategy is brilliant for anyone trying to fit a comprehensive workout into a tight lunch break.
Which really is a time saver.
But now we need to zoom out. We need to look beyond the pauses between sets and talk about macro rest, the actual rest days. And I want to address you directly for a second because we all fall victim to this mindset.
The impatience.
Exactly. Whether you are training for a specific aesthetic goal or trying to hit a performance metric, everyone wants results as fast as humanly possible. Because of that impatience, it is incredibly tempting to think that skipping rest days and grinding 7 days a week will accelerate the process.
It's a very common trap.
It is a massive counterproductive trap. The absence of work is just as important as the work itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to understand the cellular physiology of a workout. The literature is very clear that physical exercise, whether that is creating mechanical tension with heavy weights or creating metabolic stress through high-intensity intervals, is essentially a destructive process.
You are actively damaging your body.
You are. You're creating micro tears in your muscle fibers. The workout itself is merely the stimulus. It's the trauma that breaks down the tissue. That cellular breakdown is what creates that familiar delayed onset muscle soreness. Or, as the source perfectly describes it, that profound dread at the sight of stairs.
Oh, that deep, heavy dread when you have to walk downstairs after a heavy leg day is universal.
We've all been there.
But this leads to what is arguably the biggest aha moment in this entire deep dive. All that strength you were trying to build, all the hypertrophy and muscle growth you were chasing, none of that actually happens while you are lifting the weights.
None of it.
It happens on your couch. It happens while you are sleeping. It is only during those extended macro rest periods that your body reconstructs into stronger formations.
But you only achieve that adaptation if you actually give the body the biological downtime to do the work.
Right. And what happens if you don't?
The alternative to giving your body that downtime is systemic burnout. For many individuals, consistently failing to take scheduled rest days leads directly into the clinical territory of overtraining syndrome.
Which sounds intense.
It is. The research highlights that overtraining isn't just about localized muscle fatigue. It is a severe systemic failure. When your central nervous system and endocrine system are constantly taxed without recovery, the consequences are severe.
Like decreased performance across the board.
Yes, decreased performance, chronically elevated resting heart rates, elevated blood pressure, a suppressed immune system that makes you highly susceptible to opportunistic illnesses, and profoundly disrupted sleep architectures.
That is a very serious cascade of issues that completely sabotages the exact health goals you're working out to achieve in the first place.
Exactly. It defeats the whole purpose.
Which brings us to the most practical question. So, how much rest do you actually need? I hear that 48-hour rule thrown around a lot, But considering how different a competitive athlete's central nervous system is compared to a casual gym goer whose stress bucket is already full from work and life, does that timeline actually hold up?
It's a great question, and it's exactly why the research presents such mixed messaging. Recovery capacity is highly individualized.
So the 48 hours isn't gospel.
No, it's not. You are right that the traditional 48-hour rule, which is based on the fact that muscle soreness typically peaks 2 days post-exercise, is largely observed among competitive athletes.
And their entire lifestyle is built around recovery.
Exactly. They have optimized nutrition, elite conditioning. They aren't trying to squeeze in a workout after a 9-hour shift at a desk and a stressful commute.
So for the general population, the guidelines have to adapt.
They do. The clinical experts cited in the research suggest that if you are a newbie, relatively new to exercise, your neuromuscular system is going to be far less efficient. You might actually need up to 72 hours of rest between targeting the same muscle groups.
That's 3 whole days.
Yes. And then you have sleep specialists arguing that if your nutrition is dialed in, simply ensuring you get 8 high-quality hours of sleep might be enough daily recovery for moderate training.
It's a lot of conflicting information. Fortunately, we don't have to guess because the data provides a solid empirical tiebreaker.
The meta-analysis.
Yes, a comprehensive meta-analysis focused specifically on optimal strength development. That analysis determined that taking 1 to 2 full rest days between intense training sessions is the optimal sweet spot for the vast majority of people.
And that applies broadly.
It does. Specifically, that applies to beginners who are running full-body routines 3 days per week, as well as experienced lifters who might be pushing extremely high intensities 2 to 3 days per week.
That 1 to 2 days of dedicated recovery feels like a very manageable, realistic target. But it is vital to acknowledge that this isn't a rigid, one-size-fits-all prescription.
You have to factor in your own biological realities.
You do. Age is a massive variable. As we get older, our cellular repair mechanisms slow down and muscle recovery naturally takes longer.
Makes sense.
You also have to modulate your rest based on the specific exercise intensity, the overall frequency, duration, and crucially, your diet.
You can't out-train a diet that lacks the building blocks for recovery.
Absolutely not. With all those shifting variables, the one absolute non-negotiable certainty across all the literature is that mandated scheduled rest is undeniably crucial.
So what does this all mean for the execution of your actual rest day? Does taking a rest day mandate that you do absolutely nothing?
Just lying on the couch.
Yeah, are we supposed to just lie horizontally on the floor for 24 hours to maximize recovery?
Not at all. In fact, complete immobilization can sometimes stiffen you up more. The literature clarifies that your muscles don't need a total break from movement to fully recover.
So active recovery is legit.
It is very legit. The data strongly supports active recovery. Engaging in low-intensity, steady-state movement post-workout can significantly increase muscle relaxation. This acts as a flushing mechanism, clearing out metabolic waste products and delivering nutrient-rich blood to the damaged tissues, which directly speeds up your recovery.
We're talking about highly restorative activities here.
Right. Swimming light laps, taking a brisk walk, doing some yoga or Pilates, or a very light jog. The research confirms that muscles can actually work to full capacity even in the recovery stage, as long as the intensity stays low.
I think that is incredibly empowering to hear. A rest day does not have to equal a lazy day if you don't want it to. And beyond active recovery, the literature catalogs an entire toolkit of recovery accelerators.
Things you can proactively do.
Yes. If you want to speed up tissue repair, you can integrate protocols like icing, heating, static stretching, massage therapy, and of course, the trusty foam roller.
Painful, but effective.
Very painful. But stepping away from the physical interventions, there is the undeniable foundation of proper post-workout nutrition, ensuring adequate protein intake. And as we keep circling back to sleep.
Sleep is paramount.
Even the simple act of properly cooling down after a session helps.
To really synthesize the scientific consensus on all of this, the literature features a brilliant quote from Dr. Cedric Bryant, the Chief Science Officer for the American Council on Exercise.
What did he say?
He frames it perfectly. He says, everything needs time to recover, rebuild, and rejuvenate before exposed to stress again.
Everything needs time to recover. That is so foundational. And before all our dedicated endurance athletes and cardiovascular lovers out there think this whole conversation only applies to the weight room, the physiological rules apply to you too.
The heart is a muscle.
Exactly. The exact same principles of cellular breakdown and systemic fatigue apply to running, swimming, or cycling. Your cardiovascular engine requires dedicated time for structural recovery, just like your biceps do.
And it goes even deeper than the obvious muscles. The research emphasizes the hidden, invisible benefits of rest. Recovery is vital for complex biochemical processes. We are talking about the complete restoration of your immune system and strengthening your bone tissue in response to the mechanical load.
It's all happening behind the scenes.
It is. As a final, vital word of caution, the clinical advice stresses that you must learn to intuitively recognize the difference between standard muscle soreness and actual pain. If you are experiencing sharp, acute pain, your body isn't just sore, it's actively begging for a break. Do not be afraid to take the time off.
It is such a powerful, necessary reframe of how we view our time. Progress really is a strict math equation. It requires intelligently structured smart sets, mindful form so you don't break your own structure, and above all, unapologetic rest.
This raises an important question, though, and it is something worth reflecting on outside the context of fitness.
Oh, where are we going with this?
Well, we have just spent this time exploring how physical growth absolutely demands this strict cycle of strategic stress, followed by mandated rest. So, how might applying this exact same work-to-rest ratio change the way you approach your mental workload?
Oh, wow.
Right. How might treating your brain like a muscle change how you schedule your creative projects or your daily professional life?
What a phenomenal concept to consider. Taking that physical methodology of progressive overload and recovery and mapping it directly onto our cognitive lives. I love the idea of scheduling mental macro rest. We will leave you with that thought to mull over today. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us and for giving your brain a little bit of strategic, productive stress today. Take care of yourselves, enjoy those well-earned rest days, and we will catch you on the next one.